In the military, titling isn't about houses or cars, but it does disarm you. The Department of Defense, also known as the Department of War, has apparently been just as bad as the VA when it comes to stripping veterans of their Second Amendment rights for no reason. This Veterans Day, we're shedding light on the newly discovered gun ban known as military titling, and how the Department of Defense is using this process to strip service members and veterans of their rights by adding them to the NICS database of prohibited persons. Hi, I'm Ben, and you're watching the Minuteman Moment. But before we get into the video, I wanted to tell you quickly about how GOA is the only no-compromise gun lobby in Washington, D.C. Our federal and state teams are on the ground from the halls of Congress to state houses nationwide fighting for your Second Amendment rights. We're also in the courts taking the fight to tyrannical laws and winning. We recently overturned universal background checks in Virginia, and we don't plan on stopping there. If you haven't already, go ahead and visit gunowners.org and become a member. We're working on abolishing all gun control, and we can't do it without your help. Okay, now back to the video. GOA has done a ton of work to protect veterans and service members' gun rights. For 3 decades, we fought against the Veteran Fiduciary Rule, which was used to disarm over 250,000 veterans since the Clinton administration. Just last year, GOA was able to pass a law that prevented any more veterans from being disarmed. And right now, we're hard at work with the Trump administration on hopefully removing the remaining 250,000 plus veterans from the NICS system soon. But recent reporting has brought to light another massive gun ban affecting thousands of gun-owning veterans known as titling. So, what is military titling and how does it disarm innocent veterans? Well, unlike your car or house title, titling in the military refers to when a service member's name is listed as the subject of a military criminal investigative report, even if that service member was never arrested, charged, or convicted of a crime. So let's say something happens, like you witness a bar fight between 2 service members. Then, the Department of War opens an investigation. They index you as a witness, and then your name goes into the Defense Central Index of Investigations, or DCII. Then, DCII reports your name to the FBI, who puts it into the National Instant Criminal Background Check System, or NICS. This NICS database is where every felon, murderer, rapist, etc. is listed to prevent them from buying a firearm using a background check. You've got that right. That's exactly how the Department of Defense has been treating service members for years using this titling process. Even the standard for titling is extremely low, a fact that the military itself admits. Here's what the official FAQ document for the military on titling says. Legally, this is a very low standard, far below the standard required at trial by a court of law. Titling is not a legal or judicial decision. It is an operation procedure used by CID. But it gets worse. The military shares their database of service members that have been titled with more than 24 agencies, including the FBI, even if the case was dropped. Additionally, according to reporting from the War Horse, a non-profit journalism site about military service, investigators are young soldiers who don't have a significant level of criminal justice experience, but are given tremendous authority to make determinations that follow people for the rest of their lives. Just take, for example, the subject of this same article, a service member named Denise Rosales, who has never been arrested, handcuffed, or spent a night behind bars. Yet, when a background check was run on Rosales, the FBI reports that she was arrested or received into custody 3 times in January of 2021. This stems from a birthday party that Rosales threw for her husband when she was deployed in Kuwait. At the time, she was a member of the Texas Army National Guard, and some of her guests allegedly brought alcohol in a country where alcohol is illegal. Rosales was never arrested, but was given an administrative reprimand. But that's not what the FBI's NICS database shows. And now, the Army is refusing to amend her records, so she's suing them to do so. Rosales' story is not unique. There are many other service members out there who have been titled and now cannot buy a firearm because they're listed as criminals for crimes they neither committed nor were even arrested or charged with committing.
This is affecting thousands of people, thousands of service members, thousands of veterans, many of whom don't even know that they have an issue. A lot of these people find out for the first time that there's some error that leading to this criminal record when they go to apply for a job, to go try to get a firearm, when they have some type of employee, background check. This is a systemic problem, and it really arises from the Army using the wrong form and transmitting erroneous information. The Army agents are instructed to fill it out. They fill it out as best they can, which is to just make up information. They put it in there. It gets shipped off to the FBI, and there's nothing these soldiers can do about it.
But it doesn't even have to be a small administrative issue like the one Rosales received. In fact, even those falsely accused or witnesses to crime can be titled. After being cleared by a military board for not committing any misconduct, moral, or professional dereliction, Colonel David Garcia is still popping up in the FBI's background check as if he were charged and arrested with a crime. This process doesn't only affect a handful of individuals as well. According to Stars and Stripes contributor and former Army attorney Christopher Nunaviller, the titling process could affect as many as 1 million service members. This is because every year, the Army's Criminal Investigation Division conducts 10,000 investigations, and the Air Force's Office of Special Investigation does around 22,600. These investigations can sweep up large swaths of people who may be investigated but never charged, like in the case of the National Guard Recruiting Assistance Program investigation between 2012 and 2016. Investigators titled and indexed over 2,000 troops, but only prosecuted 137. The audit of this investigation found that only 7% of the names were correctly given to the FBI. The Army's Criminal Investigation Division continues to use the titling paperwork as administrative action, so it's not a far stretch to see how this paperwork could lead to a slew of horribly unconstitutional outcomes. This loose definition for subject of an investigation is harmful and does not afford any protection for these service members' civil rights. Colonel Garcia said it's the same as if a police officer pulled you over, ran your license and insurance through the system, gave you a warning, but the system showed that you'd been arrested instead. Apparently, these titling records remain in the Army system, and therefore in the FBI's NICS system, for 40 years, all over allegations. According to the report from the War Horse, this entire system is an overcorrection in response to the Sutherland Springs shooting in Texas, the same shooting that was stopped by a good guy with a gun and GOA spokesperson Stephen Williford. The killer, who will not be named in this video so we can deny him the infamy and public attention many mass murderers desire, was an Air Force veteran with 2 domestic assault convictions. Those convictions typically would have prevented him from buying a gun, but that wasn't the case. Turns out, the Air Force never submitted his records to the FBI's NICS system. Well, afterwards, the public demanded accountability. The Department of Justice settled a lawsuit from the victims' families for $114.5 million. In response, according to the War Horse, there was an overcorrection by the military. Now, even allegations of bad conduct are submitted and disarm innocent veterans. This process needs major reform. Veterans should not be getting their Second Amendment rights stripped away from them for allegations. But luckily, there are people who are advocating for reforming the system. Representative Eli Crane, one of GOA's allies, introduced a legislative amendment this year to reform the titling process. Additionally, this year's National Defense Authorization Act has passed the House with language to report on the due process concerns on titling. These are great steps in the right direction, but more needs to be done. That's why we're calling on our members to stand up in defense of veterans and their Second Amendment rights and ending the misuse of the titling process at once. Call Congress at 202-224-3121 and tell them to support titling reforms for military members. And while you're at it, call the White House too. Let President Trump and his administration know about this issue by submitting a comment at whitehouse.gov/contact. President Trump could easily issue an executive order directing the Department of War to correct this terrible practice. We'll keep you updated as this situation develops. Now, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date with GOA's latest fights for your rights.